I then listened to another book about American animals called American Buffalo by...
I see a theme emerging here.
By Stephen Ranella. Now, Stephen Ranella is a hunter in America, and he has a program on Netflix, but I was listening to his actual narration of American Buffalo, which is the story of how he won kind of a lottery ticket to go and be one person to go allowed to go and hunt a buffalo, and he writes a book about it. I don't really I'm not a fan of hunting, but I like the way Stephen Ranella kind of writes about his experiences of hunting as well. It's really good kind of information, especially if you're an aspiring writer such as I, but also his kind of ethos, his morals surrounding hunting as well, is a really interesting approach which I didn't really consider, and I definitely see his point of view. I wouldn't go out and do it myself, but I completely understand now after I've read this book why someone such as he would. I think he's a good advocate for people, kind of harvesting their own meat and that kind of thing. Anyway, it is about hunting a buffalo, and buffalo obviously were kind of the main source of meat in the 19th century and much more before that as well. Before the Native American tribes that hunted them using horses, using cliffs, all this kind of stuff. So really interesting for me. Another kind of non-fiction or hunting experience read.
And also now another text that I read for my revision, my assessments, is Hedda Gabler. This is a drama text written by Henrik Ibsen, who is one of the core directors, the foundation of a lot of growth in theatre since. Hedda Gabler was written, directed and performed originally in 1890, and it is about a woman recently married in her house and how she copes with the restrictions of society, and how this twists her into a sympathetic character, but one that you also hate because she is horrible, and she does some bad stuff, and it's very interesting psychological response to the pressure of propriety of the time, and it's a really great play, and one I enjoyed reading again for my performance, because for my assessment, because in this we had to create our own concept for the acting, design and everything, so it's just really interesting play to look at from that perspective.
And then I read a novella sent to me by the author, by someone called Nathan Dean Talamantes, I believe, and it's called Sacred Fall. Now, this was a little bit out of the blue. I didn't really know kind of what it was about, really, or anything about it, or about the author. He emailed me really kindly and said, do you want to read this? I kind of had a space of a day. I read it in a couple of hours. It's only like 80 pages, something like that. But it's a novella about kind of dedicated to a director who, again, I'd also never heard of. I'm probably not the right audience for this. Called Alejandro Jodorowsky, I believe. I might be getting that wrong. I might be butchering it. I'm sorry. I think he was from Chile. But yeah, it's kind of a few fantastical elements of stories surrounding the director's life, and then there are letters in between, which kind of, love notes. Not love notes. Okay. Letters of admiration, I'd say, to the director. It was. I don't think I'm the intended audience. I don't think I got out of it what the author would want people to get out of it, because I hadn't heard of anything to do with this kind of area. I kind of jumped into it quite blindly. It was written really nicely. I'd definitely read something else by the author, because he had a really nice colloquial style that was easy to read, but also asked some really nice thinking questions. And then I decided, I found out about the Norton critical editions of many classics, and I had an urge to kind of read all of, as many classics as I can, and I'm going through them now, kind of one as I'm reading another book. This is kind of my research now, and while I listen to another book, so I can have 3 books on the go. And my first one was Inferno, so not the whole Divine Comedy. I only wanted to read the Inferno because I've read it before, but the whole comedy, but I wanted to focus on the aspects of hell, and kind of I'm pinching quotes here and there for maybe some pieces of work that I do in the future. But I love the Norton editions because they have kind of footnotes on each page, talking about the references in each piece, and then at the end they have some essays as well. So which was really great to read and to see, even though those other aspects of the writing that I wouldn't be able to kind of pick up on, not being someone who's studying it, at MA level or anything, PhD level, that kind of thing. So they're really interesting, and obviously, in fact, it's amazing. This is as grimdark as it gets. Nothing is grimmer than history, and this is fantastical history, and oh boy, is it dark. Now, the portrayal here of Satan is very different to another read, which I also read, which I will talk about in a second. But
I wonder what that is.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this.
And now I'm going to talk a bit about, so during assessments, I've also had a PI, which is a personal investigation, and it's coursework. So you choose a question, and you have to choose 2 main texts to talk about, and they are supported by 2 or 3 others. And so I chose the topic of how does Cormac McCarthy and Kurt Vonnegut present conflict in Blood Meridian and Slaughterhouse-Five.
A lot to talk about.
Yes.
How many words did you have?
I originally had 7,500. It's now
I bet
on
you find that a struggle.
It's now on 6,000, and I need to cut it down to 4,500. So, good luck to me with that.
Cool.
But anyway, let's be happy for now. And so one of the books that I used to kind of help me with this is For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. This was the first book by Hemingway that I read. I read this originally last year, and this was really brilliant. I think that it's a book. I'm not as much of a fan of books that give clear-cut answers. I like books that they present the conflict and they kind of show that it could go both ways. And in this, it talks about, is sacrifice for the greater good worth it? So this looks at the Spanish Civil War of the 1930s, and it is from the perspective of a volunteer called Robert Jordan, not the author.
Hang on a minute.
Not the author. And it's very interesting how it takes stuff of guerrilla warfare and how he mixes with a few people who the cause is much closer to as well. And I thought it was written really beautifully, and it does question whether sacrificing your own humanity is worth it during war. And it really did focus on the question of conflict. So thanks, Hemingway, for this. A dark, very sad, but brilliant read.
Nice little edition as well.
It's quite cozy, isn't it? You can just put it in your pocket. And nice gold pages.
Exactly
as well.
what I want to do with that book. Put it in my pocket. That sounds really disrespectful. I didn't mean that. I would like to read it. I didn't mean it vastly. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Hemingway. And then I read through the recommendation of William, my lovely brother, because he helped me go through all the classics.
Wait. Did you forget my name for a second? He looked straight up. Through the recommendation of
my brother.
Ed.
Sorry, Will. William Gwynne, William John Ronald Gwynne, William J.R. Gwynne. I know your name now, I promise. But yeah,
still doesn't take away the fact you forgot.
William recommended quite a few books to me. He helped me spend most of my wages, which was quite nice.
I love spending other people's money.
And then borrowing the books. But this is a Greek play by Sophocles, thank you, called Oedipus Rex. Yeah?
Oedipus Rex.
Oh, I know nothing. It's
confusing. It's only because we don't know.
Yeah, William studied this. But I loved this. This was really, really good. I think it was it's kind of written about a king and a few prophecies as well, and it's told in a kind of ancient Greek classical style as well. Obviously, I think it's written in ancient Greek, isn't it?
As the center,
absolutely. And I loved it. I think it's only about 90 pages or so, 40 pages. There you go then. But I would, this is a great play and the beginning of kind of that era of Greek. Would you say tragedy?
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. So yeah, I did pick up something.
Yeah,
then.
It's a bit of a strange one for those who know or have heard of the Oedipus complex. That Freud named it the Oedipus complex, I believe, because of this.
When Freud starts getting involved, it's gonna be weird, don't you? But
I mean, he
okay. I see why. Yeah, okay, I'm with you now.
We'll move on.
Anyway,
what's your next book?
My next book, William, is Louis L'Amour's How the West Was Won. Now, I've heard big things about Louis L'Amour. You guys know I love reading westerns, and Louis L'Amour is considered one of the kind of the OG Western writers.
A bit random, but it's quite a cool name. It rings. Louis Lamour.
Louis Lamour. Louis Lamour. Yeah, really good. He's
saying it 3 times really helped with the
he's great, but this is a tale of many different points of view of people moving to the Great Plains across the frontier, and their lives, how they interweave with each other. Now, I don't think it's aged well, to be honest. The style was nice, but I think the details, whenever it's writing about the women, it's focusing on about marriage and all this kind of, harking on about that kind of thing. But there are other things here that just feel like it's a little bit dated, okay? I'm definitely going to read a lot more Louis Lamour because, he's got a great name. It's not quite Larry Murtry-esque greatness for me, but Louis Lamour, it's a good kind of in-between book. When you're kind of, waiting, thinking, what should I read next? It's very, very readable, really digestible. And the characters were all, they were really interesting, really nicely written. I think, again, it's just a little bit dated.
Great.
Like I watched, me and Dad watched Rio Bravo by John Wayne a couple of weeks ago, and it was great, but it just felt it was really dated.
Some parts.
And then I watched The Outlaw Josie Wales with Dad, and the first 10 minutes felt like, this was I knew, sorry. It was really dated, and then suddenly it went into like whole new territory.
So
it was
good,
amazing. But anyway, that's enough about that. Louis Lamour, it's well worth a read if you're into your westerns, but if not, I wouldn't shift the TBR around to fit this one in.
And continuing the talk about my PI, this is another book that has been battered. This is a Clockwork Orange, quite an interesting cover, and I think it speaks a lot about the content. This is another book that revolves around conflict, but from a very different way. We are from the perspective of Alex. He is part of a gang in a city.
Now, I've only heard of, I have heard of Clockwork Orange in talks about Mark Lawrence's first trilogy, which I have read. I can't remember if it's
a bit like York
was an inspiration, or was inspired by Alex.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if York does he go through a bit of a redemption story at all, or?
Yeah, sometimes at the beginning it goes a bit too far for the redemption story to be like, I love this guy.
But he does progress. Yeah. So it's very interesting. This is from Alex's perspective, and he starts as a criminal and he goes to prison. And he hears the news that if he volunteers for the Ludovico technique to go under treatment, his time in prison will be cut down. And as soon as the treatment's over in a few months or a year, I don't quite remember, he will be let go. And so he thinks, great, easy way out. He thinks, they'll look at my psychology and I'll be able to find a scapegoat. He does not. It is aversion therapy. So they put videos of violence up in front of him, and he starts being sick as he watches it. And it teaches him. So if he ever starts to commit violence, he will start being sick.
Whoa, that's intense.
Yeah. So they do it to everything he loves as well as punishment, such as music. So if he hears music by Mozart, it's quite interesting. He's the most violent person, but he also loves Mozart. It's quite a weird mix, but
Mozart's for villains, 100%.
Just kind of that atmospheric build-up.
No
it's a bit like, who is it? Ride of the Valkyries at the end of Alien Covenant.
Wagner. Yeah, exactly. If you listen to classical music, if you're on the train, and
you're a villain.
You look at them like, okay, you're crazy, and you could kill someone.
But anyway, so it's very interesting about, again, is it worth it? Stripping his humanity, and at the end,
was it?
So that's a question.
Maybe.
Because at the end it just makes him hate the government more, and it shows that it shows that in this dystopian society that people are violent because the government allows that, and they are more violent themselves to subdue those under them.
That is interesting.
And at the end, we're given a glimmer of hope as to whether he redeems himself or not. But it's from his perspective, so do we really know?
Yeah, they're always the hero of their own
story.
So
it was very interesting in the PI to talk about the idea of conflict from a first-person perspective.
Well, thank you, Will. I'd like to go and read that now. But anyway, on to my next read, which was The Beautiful.
The Shadow of the Gods.
Wow, you have the voice of an angel.
No one has ever said that to me.
So, Shadow of the Gods, I didn't read this one, I listened to it. Obviously, I've read it, I think, 4 times now. And I decided to listen to it on publication day by the awesome Colin Mace was narrating it. And, it was really fantastic. I think Colin Mace did a really good job of portraying these characters, giving them that dark, gritty tone. I really enjoyed it. I think maybe his portrayal of Orca could have been a little bit harsher, maybe, but it's the narrator.
It's all to interpretation.
Absolutely,
isn't it?
yeah. So no, he did a really good job. His Icelandic was when they're speaking, their languages were pretty spot on. There are a few Viking terms that it could have been a bit better, but that's absolutely fine. The Shadow of the Gods was, obviously, I don't need to say it, it's awesome, it's fantastic, and my favourite book ever, and it really is. You just should definitely go read it, especially if you want to meet this lovely dragon or this very tiny human.
Definitely very friendly.
And the next book I read was a short story collection called Althingy, The Crescent and the Northern Star, I believe, which is co-edited by Josh Gillingham, the author of The Gatehouse, and his friend Mohammed Aurangzeb Ahmad. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Sorry if I'm not. But this is a short story collection inspired by Native... Sorry. Oh, there you go. I'm in the Native American mindset.
It's everything. There's a nice lump, Native Americans.
Inspired by Viking Age. How the Viking societies, the Nordic societies, the Nords, the Swedes, the Danes, how they met and associated with Muslim cultures as well. So that's at the forefront of every single short story. Not exactly the forefront, but that is inside every single short story. Now you have stories here from people such as Caitlin Phoenix, also from Genevieve Gorniash, I think, and also Nicholas Kotar and Eric Schumacher, who are all authors in their own right of Viking Age books as well. And this was dangerous for me because it makes me want to go pick up many other authors' works. Obviously with a short story collection, there are stories there that you're not going to gel with as nicely as well as with some others. My favourite must have been Caitlin Felix's. I think she had a great dose of humour mixed with pretty brutal action as well, and I think that was really good. Lots of the stories were really, really good fun. I like how they were all really different from one another. There were some that didn't feel like they were researched too well. Obviously, I'm a Viking reenactor, so I think I know a little bit about these kind of cultures. And yeah, there were some things. Sometimes they spoke like modern day Americans, which I'm a reader of Christian Cameron, Miles Cameron, and his level of authenticity is my holy grail, and the way his characters speak is shows how you should write historical fiction. So they were really good short stories, some that I didn't really like too much, but that's how it goes with any short story collection. I think if you like anything to do with Vikings or Last Kingdom, then it's definitely something for you. Also just to open people's eyes a little bit about how the Vikings weren't just brutal raiders, they were also traders, and they were remarkably good at trading and also associating with different cultures. There's actually I think it's Danish graffiti in Constantinople.
That sounds interesting.
It's like saying Hakon was here or something. 987, so it's really, really good.
Great. Now I will talk about another book that I discussed in my PI.
You say despised
in my book. No, I love this. I chose all books that I love because if you have the choice to talk about books, you need to, and that you're going to be studying and looking back to front to back. Why did I say back to front first? That's how I read normally, obviously. But reading many times is the point. You have to pick stuff that you love, and I chose Henry V as a play by William Shakespeare, which The King, which is a film on Netflix, was inspired by. And I talked about conflict with this, and like how obviously it's glorified for the good of England. Yeah, let's conquer everywhere. But also
the King and St. George.
That's a cool speech. To be
brilliant.
But I also thought this might just be me. I thought I could also talk a bit about trauma, and I thought Shakespeare may comment a bit on that because it talks a bit about Falstaff at the beginning, and Falstaff is an alcoholic. He does terrible things during war, as you see in some of Shakespeare's other plays, and he dies at the beginning of Henry V. And you never actually see him, it's just people talking about him. And I was thinking, well, maybe that talks about PTSD, but without actually acknowledging it. I thought that's very interesting, considering that it's late 16th century work.
Will, you cannot be writing that in your PI. Honestly, you're going to fail. You're going to fail, mate. Trust me.
Great.
I'm only joking.
Anyway, Henry V is brilliant. I love the St. Christmas Day speech. I've actually done a performance on it many times. I just love it so much. We few. We happy few. We band of brothers. For he that sheds his
No,
blood.
stop. No,
Anyway,
I mean, he couldn't be here for about, what was it, 4 minutes, 28 seconds?
probably. I started halfway through, but anyway, so Henry V, really great play. I think at parts it dips below some of Shakespeare's other works, but I think the best parts...
That's sacrilege.
The best parts, though,
Okay.
are beyond anything else in any play that I've read.
Oh, and now on to, must be probably my favourite book that isn't a reread that I've read over the last couple of months, and this probably goes into my top 5 books of all time, and it is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. Now, I decided to read this group of books, this series, in kind of a reverse order. Because Larry McMurtry wrote this first, which is actually book 3 chronologically. So I went to book 1 chronologically. This is just
Is this
amazing.
the same series as Comanche Moon?
Yes. So the first one is Dead Man's Walk, where you meet Gus and Woodrow McCall, when they're really young and they're joining with the Texas Rangers. Comanche Moon is set, 10, 20 years after, when they are captains in the Texas Rangers. Lonesome Dove is when they've given up being Texas Rangers and they are living in a town called Lonesome Dove. And they are cattle herders, cattle ranchers, and they're just living in this kind of town in the middle of nowhere, really, in Texas. And they decide to be the first people to drive cattle all the way from the very bottom of Texaco on the Mexican border all the way up to Montana, which is near Canada. And it is an odyssey. It's a journey with remarkable characters, with people defying the odds, with deep and relationships that starts off as an absolutely hilarious comedy and it ends, in Joe Abercrombie's words, as a heartbreaking tragedy. And it really is a beautiful book. It made me cry. I was weeping at the end, and I really don't do that often. It really hits home. The characters here are probably the best I've ever read. The way they're developed, just their conversations, and how someone says one word and you feel so much emotion within that. Now, I'm going to be preaching about this on the channel for a long time, so I won't drone on too much now, as this is quite a long video. But Lonesome Dove is one of, if you're ever going to read a Western, this is the one that you need to read. If you're ever going to read a book, this is the one that you need to read. So Lonesome Dove, one of my favourites of all time. He is the GOAT of the Western.
And continuing to talk about my PI, this is one of my main texts, Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. So we've talked about Henry V, a play that glorifies war in the form of a political or historical play, and Clockwork Orange, which is dystopian fiction. And now we have comedy. Set during World War II, during the bombing of Dresden.
Not funny,
but Kurt Vonnegut was actually there, and
Also
he
not
survived. So it's very interesting that he chose to put this in the form of a comedy, and I guess that it shows that was his way of coping. And he is very funny. Slaughterhouse-Five is a comedy, but also absurdist science fiction / literary fiction. It's a weird amalgamation of genres that when my English teacher said you should read this and kind of said the premise, he said, I know it's weird, but try it. I was a bit like...
Yeah, we had the same conversation. I was like, William, should I read Slaughterhouse-Five? And you kind of told me what it's about, and I was like, why would I read that?
Why would I want
so
to?
Weird.
Yeah, but this is actually probably one of my favourite books. It's really great, and again, for my PR, I'm talking about that a lot, I know, but that's all that bit I've been doing recently, and this is just perfect to talk about as a different spin. We've got a central figure of Billy Pilgrim, who is just the nicest person, and
like Fitz.
Yeah, but he's also a pacifist, but put into war. Not like Fitz. Fitz does bad things for good reasons.
Well,
and he just put through so much, and you really do feel for him. But it's really funny as well, and it's weird how I feel really weird like laughing when it's in the premise of like Dresden is about to be bombed and civilians about to die.
Dresden's a cool word.
It is cool. It's a city in Germany.
It feels good on the
Dresden.
on the old tongue.
Sounds a bit like somewhere in like Warhammer, but I can't think
Sounds
of where.
somewhere in Germany.
Oh yes, German. So the Empire.
I know. Yeah, so the Empire is German.
Your jokes, Reese.
You had no reaction.
I had no. Sounds so in Germany. Anyway, Slaughterhouse-Five. This was brilliant by Kurt Vonnegut. The first book I've read by him, and up to date, the only book I've read. I definitely need to read more by him because this is really great. And even though it's the most random thing I've ever read, it was still something I've really enjoyed.
And going from talking about hell in Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, Inferno, which what I actually read, going to John Milton's Paradise Lost. Now, Dad said this was a massive influence when Dad was writing The Faith and the Fallen, and...
But he actually got the name from Malice.
Yeah, exactly, So Deep in Malice, and I'm not surprised. All of Dad's actually keywords, Valor, Ruin, Wrath, are all in here. Dread, Blood, Courage. Paradise Lost, written... in quite a strange style. I think Milton got quite a bit of stick when he actually wrote this because he was kind of accused of being a Satanist because he's written from the perspective of Satan in hell after Satan's been cast out of heaven, and then it leads all the way up to Satan going to the Garden of Eden and persuading Eve to eat the apple.
Well, William Blake actually said that Milton was of the devil's party without knowing it.
See, that's a bit harsh, isn't it? I personally loved this so much. This was definitely grimdark as hell. Yeah, and told from the perspective of Satan.
We've been waiting to say that since
I've waited my whole life, yeah. Satan is, immediately he has got so much... such an aura around him, and he's a great orator. He's really good at inspiring the local populace of demons and snakes and whatnot. And I just think he was written so well, and he does actually change through the book depending on who he's with, and the story and what's actually going on through his battle. He's trying to get back up to heaven, this kind of thing.
Make that hell of heaven.
Yeah,
heaven.
exactly. And this is so quotable for someone who wants to, like I want to do, take quotes from this and use it to inspire writing. Boy, is this amazing. And John Milton did a great job. I love reading C.S. Lewis's essays at the back of this because this is a Norton edition, so it's got essays at the back talking about the little details, how Satan's written as well, and he's the ultimate villain.
He is. So it is his charisma, isn't it?
Yeah, he's quite likable.
That he's actually likable, which is like, yeah.
I was like, oh no, I like Satan. No wonder he was accused of being a Satanist. No, I like Satan, but he's a good leader.
Save yourself.
Yeah.
And the last book I'm going to talk about in this video is Blood Meridian.
Another great villain.
Another great villain who was actually may have been inspired by Satan in Paradise Lost. But I'll talk about that in a minute. This is one of the main texts of my PI. That name again. And Blood Meridian, it's fair to say there's a lot of violence and conflict within this.
Well, yeah, a little bit. It's more
Just
about
tiny bit.
daffodils growing,
and
fields of daisies.
Of course, and just like nice speeches and like birthdays.
Everyone's got lots of money, they just have parties.
No, sorry to disillusion you, but this is about death, nasty death and killing people.
And gore, and blood, and slaughter,
and just self-preservation above all else. But apart from that, it's great. No, that is weirdly what makes it great because
and then on to the second chapter.
Cormac McCarthy does all this in a brutal, very visceral manner, but he does it in a way that I'd argue. Some people say that it glorifies war, but I really don't think so because it made me feel sick.
Yeah,
and if it makes
he
you feel
tells
sick,
it with no emotion. He tells it with
it's ambivalent.
Such clarity that it was as if he was a presence there with no opinion or thought on anything.
Yeah. And that's what I was talking about earlier with the idea that I like when the reader can think about the conflicts that are presented and make their own decisions. And from the ambivalent perspective of the narrator, it's up to you to decide whether you like or dislike war. And if you read this and like war, then I'm a bit worried, really. Blood Meridian is fantastic, and it has who I would say is an iconic character in the form of Judge Holden, who is like Satan, charismatic, intelligent, clever, a born leader, but he is evil, really evil, and a terrifying physical figure as well.
There are stories in here about him where other characters talk about the judge and how they met him, and they just blow my mind. They gave me goosebumps.
It's terrifying.
The gunpowder scene and just.
And he talks about war and how he justifies it, and it's wrong, but then the way it's formed and how Cormac McCarthy writes those monologues, it's like you see what he means, but you know it's wrong. It convinces the people that he is with.
Yeah, people say kind of he's similar to Marlon Brando's character in Apocalypse Now. That kind of that presence, and also the look of him as well, but also the way he delivers such thought-provoking speeches in such a troubling and not horrible way. Yeah.
Horror. That's my interpretation of
You come
Marlon
here
Brando.
on the day
Oh my dad's
my
wedding.
mother's wedding.
That's Godfather. I love him in that. But anyway, enough about Marlon Brando. We can do a video about Marlon Brando at another point. Blood Meridian is fantastic. One of my favourite books of all time, and I've really enjoyed studying it in great detail.
And on to my penultimate read. It is The Coward by Stephen Arion. Stephen Arion is a great author. He's engaged with us a lot on Twitter and on our videos as well. And he's such a great guy. He really talks about his writing process and helping aspiring writers out as well. He's got a great YouTube channel, which we will link in the description below. But Stephen Arion's The Coward. Now, this is the first book I've read by Stephen Arion, which he actually sent me himself very kindly. So thank you, Stephen.
And it comes out this month.
It does come out in June. It comes out on the 8th. And it is what I say, Kings of the Wild meets David Gemmell. Now, David Gemmell writes fantastic, heroic, and sometimes not heroic characters, but he writes from the perspective of heroes in such a groundbreaking way, and I could see the influence here. I did have a chat with Stephen as well, asking about his influences for this, and he said David Gemmell was one of his main influences with writing, that he even was able to meet him once, which was amazing. But anyway, he's got that kind of tone of humour throughout. It's called The Coward, so it's about someone coming to terms with having to be a hero. It harks back to that old style of fantasy. If you like Fable, the games, that's what I grew up on, Fable, and it kind of gives me. It's very similar to that with the humour, but also the darkness that the heroes have to go through. And the quest, it is about someone going on a quest, but someone who doesn't really want to go on a quest and doesn't actually plan on going on it, but they deliver really well. And the book is awesome. It sets up book 2 really nicely as well, which Stephen told me that is already actually written, which is fantastic. So really looking forward to that. But thank you, Stephen, for sending us the book. I think William's going to be reading that very soon as well.
I'm looking forward to reading The Coward. I've not had time in the recent weeks. Assessments, they are the bane of reading. But now I'm back, and I will be reading The Coward soon. Don't know why I went for that accent, but we'll go with it.
From Tennessee.
I will be reading The Coward soon.
And on to my final book then. Now, I've been listening to this. It is The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker. Now, Dad's always been telling me how much of a great writer R.J. Barker is. And seeing his panels with Fanfi Addict and other, videos on YouTube, and seeing him on Twitter, R.J. is such a great guy. And I just had to read The Bone Ships.
He's charismatic.
He really is. His collection of taxidermy.
But not in the same way as... Let me clarify. I'm talking about not in the same way as Judge Holden or Satan.
Yeah. But, R.J. Barker's collection of taxidermy leaves me very envious. It's very cool. But The Bone Ships, I was a bit worried at first, to be honest, because I'm not really the biggest fan of books told on ships. I read, is it Red Seas Under Red Skies, or Red Skies Over Red Seas by Scott Lynch, and the whole boat sequence put me off a little bit. I don't know, just trapped in that one environment. But R.J. Barker's writing is superb, and every scene on the boats I loved. This whole fantastical elements of the bone ships, which the ships are actually made out of dragons. Dragons haven't been seen for a very long time, and it's a little bit like Skyrim. Suddenly, dragons are back, baby, and bigger than ever. And the main character, Joran Twiner, is on one of the bone ships, a ship of the dead.
Awesome. And
he has to go, he's the kind of second in command, first mate to someone called Lucky Mies, and she's charismatic. And they together
Favourite word today.
Absolutely. They together go, and they have to capture the last dragon, because they're at war with another island, another kind of pirate society, and they want to use the dragon to defeat them, or maybe to, maybe even unite them, who knows. But It's a great book. The first 40%, I would say, is kind of building up and world building, and when the journey gets going, it's amazing, and it is really a big wave ripping ride.
Thank you so much for watching this video. We know this is a very long one. Yeah. I didn't get through many, but Ed's,
I think I made
that is a mountain. That really is a mountain. Yeah. We got through a lot of books combined. I'll feed off your energy there. And yeah, so we got through a lot of books. We hope that this reminds you of some of the best moments or some of your favourite books that you may have read, and also introduce you to a few others that may have caught your eye, that you're intrigued in. I'll put a link to a few in the description below. I'll put a link to The Broken Binding, where you'll be able to find many of these books. And I just hope that you've enjoyed. We've not done this for quite a while, so maybe a bit rusty really, but I hope you enjoyed. The Brothers Gwynne. Truth and courage.
Truth and courage.